Today we're really going to talk about the evolution of identity. We're going to talk about where we were, where we are, and where are we going. We're really getting an expanded understanding of what identity is, how identity is formed. And so today, trans people have existed all throughout history, on every continent, and in just about every culture. Much of our history was erased through colonization, through conservative religious ideals. And now, in the new millennium, it feels like the momentum to document our history, our stories, is excelling, is expanding, it's growing. Today's panelists are going to discuss how they have personally experienced our community's evolution and what their vision of the future of our movement is. I'm going to introduce our panelists, and they will each take about 5 minutes to tell you a little bit more about who they are, what their work is, and what they're doing in the future. My esteemed panelists are all doing amazing work.
So my name is Michelle Dennis, and I'm by far the oldest panel member. I just turned 73. So my story starts in the 1940s as a small little boy, knowing that how I was growing up just didn't seem right. And then the first time I ever tried on my mother's undergarments was electric. How many of you ever got yourself a shock by putting your finger in the wall socket? It was like that. And then from that point on until the mid-1990s, 50 years, I off and on cross-dressed. And I was actually married. I was married for 40 years. And then in 1995, the internet happened, and I found people like myself. And the first time I was out in public was on my birthday in 1999. And then for the next 5, 6 years, my wife and I at that time, she had her therapist, I had my therapist, we had our therapist. It was a zoo. And in 2004, she decided that she didn't want to be in the relationship anymore, and it was very difficult, but friendly. We divorced in 2007, and then I met what I think is the relationship I waited a lifetime for. So I'm a newlywed, been married a little over 3 years. And she put a newsletter out to her family and friends, we're going to get married, and the last paragraph of the letter said, so if a 65-year-old, never before married, bisexual Jewish woman can meet and fall in love is going to marry a 70-year-old male to female transgender divorced Christian, well, damn, anything's possible. So my journey is from a man who had feminine feelings to a man who had both feminine and masculine sides, to a person who had an intermixture of masculine and feminine, and now I'm just me. And luck of the draw, I got a male body and a feminine gender identity. And what I do in the community, I'm producing a TV series interviewing transgender icons in Los Angeles. I'm a PFLAG speaker. And I'm also taking on becoming the first in a number of mainstream organizations. And I'm really proud of that. In June, I got elected as the treasurer for the League of Women Voters of Los Angeles, their first transgender member. So I'm out to push the boundaries and create safe space for transgender people. And I'll share a little bit more later on. Thanks.
Thank you. Johnson, who is a highly sought-after producer, director, filmmaker, as well as a member of the West Hollywood Transgender Advisory Board. Please, big round of a hand for Jay Johnson.
Good afternoon. I'm Jay Johnson, and as Drian said, I sit on the West Hollywood Transgender Advisory Board, and I'll just start by saying the pronouns I identify with are male, him, his. I am a trans man or a male of transgender experience. And my transition began at birth. It was a birth story. The doctors just got it wrong. And that's okay, because that happens quite a bit in our community. But I won't go into my entire transgender transitioning story, but I will say this, that it has shaped everything that I do in my career, who I am in my career, what I do in all of my business ventures. I am what you would call a serial entrepreneur. So not only do I produce and direct and write films, but I also run a brand management company that I created from the ground up. So these are things that, just to share with you, that your clients who identify as trans are, guess what, just people. And if there's one piece of information that I can share with the world about a transgender person, is that transgender people are just like any other people, just with different experiences. So that being said, I'm sure we'll share more throughout the panel. I'm delighted to be here with you today, and thank you for having me.
Next, we have the wonderful Nadia Rain Valdez, who is an actress, producer, filmmaker. Most recently was working with the show Transparent. So please, a big round of applause for Rain.
Hello, good afternoon. As Drian says, my name is Rain Valdez, and the pronouns that I go by are she, her, super shero, starlet. And my transition started, I would have to agree with Jay, at birth. I mean, it started from the beginning. As soon as I was able to walk, I knew I was different from how my parents decided to present to me. It was kind of a long journey, and I think it got more serious as I was in high school. And I think for me it started when I just couldn't relate to my own name, my own birth name. And I created a tag name. Do you guys remember tag names? Do you guys still have that? Do people have a tag name? Cool. So my tag name was Rain, and it was just something that I signed on letters, on my belongings, and it was just something to make me feel like I belonged somewhere. And I think a couple of years into high school, I started asking my friends to refer me by my tag name. So they did. They started calling me Rain, and it felt so real, and it felt so natural, and it just felt like it was me, and that they were seeing me and addressing me, and they were very supportive, and I think that was the beginning of it. I was always very androgynous femme, so I can't say that I was ever really socialized as a boy or a man. I was just always very feminine, and I kind of downplayed my femininity just so I can fit in a little bit. So dressed very androgynously, and had a cute short haircut, and kind of I was kind of like the cool, funky, goth kid, I guess. And it wasn't until I moved to, this was all in Guam, by the way. I'm originally from the Philippines. That's where I was born, and we migrated to Guam when my mom remarried, and that was at the age of 5, and so that's where I went to high school. It wasn't until I moved to LA at the age of 19, which is the year 2000, where I started really exploring more of my feminine identity. And I got into an acting class, because that's always been a dream of mine. And the instructors and the administrators just enrolled me as female. And at the time, I was kind of shocked, but I didn't correct them. I just kind of let it play out to see where this was going to go. And like I said, I was always very feminine, so it wasn't really that much of a surprise that they would make that mistake. And so it really started there in acting class. I started exploring sort of, I was getting assigned these female roles, and I started kind of really digging into who I was and who I wanted to be, and it became more clear that I wanted to be a woman, and I wanted people to treat me that way, not as trans, or not as boy, or not as male, or not as masculine, but just plainly, simply a woman. That's how I wanted to be treated. So I started taking further steps, hormones, and then I took that further and had my SRS in the year of 2000. And I did something very drastic and decided to live very stealth, which in the trans community means that basically I flew under the radar. I didn't really disclose my history or my past with colleagues or friends or anything like that. Yeah, and quite recently, you know, living stealth, it gets to a point where it kind of gets to you, where, you know, how could you have gone, I started asking myself, how could I have gone through such, you know, extreme measures to become who I am, only to hide it and not tell people the journey. So that's where I am today, and just, you know, with my storytelling, my writing, and my acting, it's all about just sharing my story and telling people that, you know, even though you didn't know, we've always existed. And if you just, you know, start asking questions and talking to people, you might find that one person that is just right next to you. Yeah.
Thank you. Wonderful Justine Gonzalez. She is a proud parent of the cutest little girl in the world, and also working currently for Outfest, was the LGBT liaison to Antonio Viragosa's office, and is also a member of the West Hollywood Transgender Advisory Board. Please give a big round of applause for Justine.
Thank you. I'm Justine Gonzalez. Like Drian said, I serve as the vice chair of the West Hollywood Transgender Advisory Board. I've had the pleasure of serving mayors Antonio Viragosa and Eric Garcetti as their LGBT liaisons. I have really two really great passions and dreams of, you know, one, living and finding out who my true self is and bringing that, you know, to the world, as well as opening safe space for trans people and gender non-conforming people to gain access to economic and political power in government. I've always been a political nerd, a junkie, and for a long time, I thought I could never pursue both of these dreams, that I could only, you know, I would have the choice of excelling in politics and local politics, learning how to gain power and access for people, but never be my true self in that space at the same time. So I'm taking a stab at doing both and accepting that I have the power to both become the professional that I want to be and open those doors and access for other trans people. And I do have an amazing 2-year-old daughter who really changed my life and put me on the path to begin my transition, because before that I was very much convinced that I wouldn't transition. I've known for a very long time that I was trans, that I was very different, but there came a moment where I was looking at my daughter and saying, I told myself that I didn't want to live this example for her, to hide who I am for such a long time, and potentially tell her 20, 30 years down the line. I don't think anyone deserves that. I don't think anyone deserves a life where they have to hide themselves for decades or years because of fear or barriers or other obstacles. So I feel really good about this new journey I'm on, and I'm really happy to be here and share it with the panel and all of you. Thank you.
I often think of being trans as both a gift and a curse. You know, I think that as trans people, we really give others an understanding of what identity is, another way of seeing how identity is formed. Oftentimes, we show people that these are just labels that we've all created and that we all adhere to, and that often is a revolutionary transformation for people to see that these are just all illusions. We've all created these ideas of what it means to be male, female, and we can transform those to become identities that really fit who we are. And that's really what we're doing. We're in a place right now where we're transforming the world. So my first question to the panelists, and whoever wants to answer, please raise your hand. How has your identity changed over time, and what has shaped that evolution? Who wants to answer first? Michelle.
So as I was sharing with you before, I've gone through a series since 1990, actually back to the 40s, and I still have a male body, and I present like this in the world. I have almost exclusively full-time since 2005, although sometimes, and the women in the audience will appreciate this, this is a lot of work. So sometimes I just wake up like, oh, screw it. I'm being Mike this morning. So I identify under the umbrella of transgender, but I'm a bit fluid out in the world and sometimes androgynous. So this is really a forerunner of what's coming. And so we'll talk about that in a second.
So since I was misidentified at birth, I grew up in a household with a mother who was hyper feminine, and the fact that she had a little girl that did not identify with hyper femininity was an issue. And so there was this constant battle of me expressing myself and her expressing herself through me, right? Which what a lot of parents do anyway. And so my identity early on in my adolescence and our early teenage years was very much tomboy, right? It was labeled as tomboy. And I was like, anything I could do to get away with, okay. How I really wanted to be was, I'll fit into a tomboy, great. And that evolved into more and more masculine identity, you know, showing up at the family gatherings in a suit and tie, identifying with my dad and the way my dad would represent in the world. So that got more and more aggressive on my part. And, you know, what do all children do? They wear their parents down, right? And so eventually my mom was just like, you know what? To hell with it. Either we're gonna have peace in our household and I just need to kind of go along with this, or we're gonna fight, which would push me away. So fortunately for me, I had a parent and a household that was very supportive and, you know, instilled these principles in me to follow my own bliss, to follow my path, even though she didn't understand it or agree with it. And I think that set the foundation for me to define myself as I choose. Fast forwarding to adulthood, it was, you know, having that foundation as a child really set me up for, I really could care less what the world thinks, because what the world thinks of me is really none of my business. It's all about how I interpret my own identity and who I choose to express in the world. And so expressing as male, I did not express fully as male until I got language around what that was. Because we all know that nothing exists outside of language. So I didn't know what transgender was because there was no education around it. I only knew that I identified more masculine. But as the internet became more prominent and education started to trickle in about what it was to be transgender, originally I didn't identify with transgender because the only people who were transgender were female to males. And it's only until the last 7 years, really, that trans men have started to surface in mainstream, in media, even in our communities, because they've lived, as Rain has pointed out earlier, in a very stealth way, which is just blending into society without any sense of community or any sense of advocacy. And so once I got language around, oh, there are other trans men. And oddly enough, I had to go all the way across the country to discover that. To Philadelphia, where there's a large trans masculine presence, I decided at that point, okay, I'm trans. I'm a trans man, and I'm going to go back to LA, and I'm going to create, which is what we did here, was create the only trans masculine fraternity on the West Coast, which I'm the president of, Alpha Omega Nu, to really create create a space for guys to discover who they are and to determine their own identities. And that's really how it kind of evolves. So today I identify as a male with a trans experience because transition completes at some point.
Something that Justine and Jay particularly said in your introduction and just now really speaks to me. Just because in terms of my identity revolution, I remember when I was young and in high school and pre-high school, I was always very bold and courageous. You know, I dressed how I wanted, I acted how I wanted, I did what I wanted, I hung out with whoever I wanted. And, you know, just my friends always kind of referred me to as, you know, the go-getter type person. And it was hard because even though I was this go-getter type person, I knew who I wanted to be, but because of, you know, living under the roof of my parents, it was difficult to achieve that. So it wasn't really until when I moved out here, like I said in my introduction, when I started to explore that. But then my identity changed because of society. So I fell prey to fear, and which is, you know, why I lived stealth. And so, you know, living stealth, even though it was great, and you know, it created sort of this protective shield. It created transphobia. Like, I was very transphobic. I didn't want to be trans. I just didn't. And I didn't want people to think that I was. I didn't want people to clock me. I didn't want to be associated with anyone who was trans. And it got even tougher because, as you know, Jay just mentioned, you know, what we were seeing, you know, in the late 90s and early 2000s were negative depictions of trans women. And that really affected me because I knew in my heart that there's nothing negative about being who I am and being trans, but that's all I saw, and that's all that everyone else was seeing. And it just kind of broke my heart, and I didn't really know what to do about it. So except live stealth and keep it a secret. And so now I'm at a point where my identity has sort of evolved again, and it's sort of like a different kind of transition where I'm voicing out my history, my past, my journey. You know, I'm coming out to all my friends and colleagues who had no idea, and they've all been very loving and supportive. So you know, where I am today and how I've evolved is just, you know, living my truth and just kind of being honest with myself and being honest with everyone around me, and just being, you know, say, hey, you know, wake up, because we're not just the negative depictions that you see. And we're at a point where we're beginning to change that, and we're starting to see more positive representations of trans women and trans men and, you know, gender non-binary folks. And I think that's kind of where, and that's why we're here today, really, is to create more of that existence in this world, because we've always been here. We just need the space. We just need to start creating that space.
Who remembers?
So I would say, and I'm sorry for not including this in my introduction, I go by she and her pronouns. And my journey, I mean, it's still not over yet. I'm still figuring it all out. But I like to think of it as living halfway out of the closet for some time. Back in 2009, I came out as bi and trans. But pretty much within like 3 months, I went back in the closet on the trans part, because I had no idea what I was doing. I didn't have community yet. I didn't know other trans people. And I remember the moment where I visited the Los Angeles LGBT Center, their youth program, LifeWorks. And my intake meeting, and we had forms to fill out. And there was the gender part, the question asking, like, do you identify as transgender? And I remember that moment, like, there's just like this big conversation with myself in my head. Like, I haven't told the person that I'm trans. And I made the decision at that point. I didn't check that I was transgender. and I just lived out and by until last year. And I mean, that's a pretty dramatic shift in identity, or expressing my identity. I think people very close to me knew that I identified as trans, but the idea of living that truth, the idea of expressing it was a lot more scarier. And I think falling prey to fear isn't, I think it's a reality. It's a scary situation. There are very real physical and economic barriers to succeeding as a trans person. Only over these past few years have we seen kind of this explosion in media coverage, much more respectful media coverage. And it's still very limited in terms of scope of economic power. I believe the last time I saw numbers earlier this year of how many trans elected officials are in this country, I believe the head count is 5. And that is out of maybe 20,000 elected positions in the country. So there's not much outside of the entertainment industry, much of a presence. And that's scary for someone who loves politics, who wants that to be my career, has dreams to go, if I choose to do this, if I choose to wear makeup one day, like put on some lipstick, will anyone ever take me seriously in this field again? And I think that was the real fear for me for the last few years before I made the decision. It was just consulting with my mentors, sitting down, and I lost mentors who were very adamant about me waiting, about this not being the right time for me, because it wasn't safe enough, because it would create barriers that I couldn't overcome, or wouldn't be able to overcome for years. And making that decision is incredibly scary. It still is. I'm still involved in local politics. I serve on an advisory board for a city. But I do wonder, will I ever be able to brief a mayor on public policy again? Will anyone take me that seriously again? And that weighs on me day to day. So I identify as trans and gender fluid. Yesterday I was walking around most of the day in jeans and a t-shirt. And today I have a dress and tights on, so it's learning to live with myself and embrace my femininity. And that has, year by year, day by day, it's been a struggle of determining, one, how much of the femininity can I express? And people ask me that, like, what do you really want to do? It's like, of course, I want to shed all my masculinity. I want to take it all away. Like, just take it. But it's too powerful a tool for me right now. And it's a really incredibly, scary proposition to abandon it entirely. To go, tomorrow, I'm never gonna go out in jeans and t-shirt again. I'm always gonna wear makeup every single day. I will live with it and just be myself. But I think you brought up armor when you were talking. And I think of a suit and tie as my old armor. I felt impenetrable if I have a nice suit on, a nice tie clip. It's I can own any room I walk into. And to forsake that and go that isn't me is incredibly scary. So I'm sure a lot of the professionals in this room, deal with youth who are going through this struggle. And I think a big theme of what everyone's talking about is that we don't have the language for it. When I was 14, 15, 16, I had no idea how to talk about this. I didn't know that gender fluid was a thing, being gender queer, or anything of that nature was possible. And I just believed either I was going to be in a suit and tie or I was going to be in a dress and look beautiful. So over the course of the past 5 years, kind of dealing with those shifts in kind of how safe I feel and how ready I am, it's been an incredible journey. I wouldn't go back, but it is still a day-to-day, figuring out what is my expression? What do I want the world to see? And yeah. So I'm here now like this, but I think I have a list of 10 different combinations of wording that I identified as over the past 5 years. So,
what is your hope for the future of our movement? Where do you think our movement is going? What do you want to see come out of our movement, Michelle?
At Stonewall, 1969, credited as the genesis of gay and lesbian liberation, it's not well known that a sizable portion of those people were transgender. And
people of color. we should
people of
point
color, yes. And as the gay liberation movement organized across the country, there was a policy choice to separate transgender people out. That schism has been reconnected. HRC, Human Rights Campaign, has now, maybe 10 years ago, made the policy choice to only continue to lobby against discrimination based on sexual orientation if they also include gender identity and gender expression. However, in the transgender community, the conversation about the legitimacy of being transgender has really been about a subtext. That's the legitimacy of the reason for being transgender. And people born that way, therefore this expression must be okay. What's coming is a tidal wave of gender non-conforming people that's going to dwarf the gay and lesbian community and the transgender community combined. And the conversation is going to shift to the legitimacy of freedom for gender expression for no reason. Do you get the distinction? This is going to be very challenging, and the impact's going to be profound in our society. So we extend an invitation to you to join us at the forefront of the wave, or quite frankly, you can be dragged along at the end of the wave.
And I just want to say resistance is futile.
But seriously, you all out there are decisive, and people like you, because this conversation is beginning to shift in that direction. And it really affects everybody, not just transgender people. Freedom of gender expression for everyone, for no reason. And that's a major societal challenge, and it's coming. So my hope is that we'll be able to shape and direct and lead that conversation to expand the field of human freedom.
I just would love to see our space, an expansion of our space. You know, I mentioned earlier that we've always existed, this space just really hadn't been there for us. And, you know, I'd love to get to a place where, you know, being trans and being gender non-conforming is the norm. That's it.
I like that vision, definitely.
Events like this, spaces like this, where I see just an intergenerational connection between professionals, youth, younger people who are coming together and learning together, creating the language that so many of us have been missing. I wish the conversation that I talked about I could have had with myself and with others when I was 10, 11, 12, instead of now having it in my mid-20s instead. And it would just help me. I mean, childhood and, you know, teenage years are already so crazy and everything feels like the end of the world. But when you're not able to even face those challenges with your true self, I think you go through all those years and you feel like, what was I doing all that time? What did I put all that time in for if I wasn't ever truly myself during it? So I love this space. I love that there's so many people in this room that are trying to learn more at, you know, whatever level of your understanding, just listening more to the kids who are questioning their gender, who do have behavior that, you know, we don't typically associate with femininity, masculinity, and their bodies. Disassociating that, basically, and saying, your body doesn't have to look a certain way for you to behave a certain way. And letting people experiment and have fun, basically. So thank you all for being here. It is an incredibly heartwarming experience to see you all here listening and having this conversation with you.
What I'm going to ask the panelists next is, if you had a call to action for our audience today, what would that be? Michelle.
You know, I often speak to college classes and so forth, and remarkable statistic, somewhere between 5 and 7% of all adult males cross-dress. And I'm speaking to 200 or 300 students, there's 100 males, and I say, probably 5 to 7 of you out there cross-dress, and every guy slinks down in his chair. Afterwards, their girlfriends come over and say, yeah, he likes to wear my panties, or, you know. So what we're talking about, the way I look at it, is quite natural, but it's not yet normal. Normal being a social construction. So the call to action is, let's work together to loosen up and let people be fulfilled. And of course, there's going to have to be some boundaries, of course. But to let people be fulfilled in freedom of gender expression. We all have masculine and feminine parts for ourselves. What would it be like if you were masterful accessing both ends of that spectrum depending upon the situation? Maybe we wouldn't have wars. Maybe.
Real quick, because I know we're running out of time. And mine is really simple. Just be open. Be open to grow, to expand your learning, to expand your knowledge. Trust that you don't know everything and you never will. And why would you want to? Because you might as well be dead anyway. So just be open. Be open to experiencing the newness, the freshness, the adventure that life has to offer.
Thank you. Great.
I'll make mine quick too. Forget what you think you know and get to know what we really are. You know, open your hearts, open your minds, and, you know, mix and mingle. Come to the center, come visit us. You know, we have a lot of events. You can go to our website and check some of what we have going on. And yeah, I think that if we could all do that, just as simple as getting to know one another, could create friendships and relationships, because, you know, everyone needs to be loved. Trans people, gender, non-conforming people need love too.
Justine.
Yeah, I think I'm going to follow along the same lines. When you see someone who's trans, when you see someone, whether they're a child, teenager, you know, adult, just engage and encourage. I think that's a big thing that I've noticed walking outside now with my presentation, is that people, they have that split-second moment when they look at me and they're not sure whether to go hi and like come up and shake my hand or chat with me on the line at the grocery store. They seem kind of like hesitant. In that moment of hesitation, just choose to engage. We're people like everyone else, and we want to build community. We want to know you, and yeah, just do it. Just shake our hands, wave at us, say hi, have conversations like we're anyone else.
And it's so exciting to see the evolution of our community, the evolution of human beings to being more accepting of each other, of having a greater understanding of our diversity. We are in this moment. Let's make it a good one. Thank you so much for being here today. Thank you to all the organizers, volunteers of